So here's something kind of neat. Ducati invited me to Colorado to come check out their XDiavel. Ducati isn't exactly a name that conjures the image of suburban dads in leather trying to cosplay as a pirate on their cruiser on Sunday while he's got kicked out of the house because his wife, who's probably named Karen, is working on a meatloaf or tater tot hot dish or whatever they eat in the Midwest. Ducati is first and foremost a sport bike company that produces some of the most performance-oriented bikes on the planet. But in 2010, Ducati came out of nowhere with their Diavel, the first attempt at making a muscle cruiser. Depending on who you ask, myself specifically, they didn't really nail the muscle cruiser thing. To me, the Diavel rides a lot more like a gigantic naked bike than a cruiser, and yeah, it's got a lower seat, and yeah, the pegs are a little bit lower and a little bit more forward, but it's a sport bike first and a cruiser second.
Write that down.
Not to mention that it made power like a sport bike. The Gen 1 had an 1198cc V-twin putting down 162 horsepower and 94 foot-pounds of torque. Now, to be clear here, I'm not complaining. These are all awesome things. But when you start to stack it up against bikes like the Rocket 3, the Vmax, or the rest of the V-twin muscle bikes, the Diavel doesn't really fit in. It was fast as hell, and despite having a 240-section rear tire, it was surprisingly nimble. That's not really what you get when you look at a muscle cruiser. Then, as Ducati is wont to do, they made a whole bunch of special editions. The AMG, the Chrono, the Strata, the Titanium, the Diesel, and most importantly for today, the XDiavel. In 2016, they released the X with forward-mounted pegs for a little bit more stretched out ride, and because hell froze over, Ducati used a belt drive.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
I know it might sound a little bit odd at first glance, but it makes total sense to me. The goal of the bike was to make a touring-ready SKU that was ready to throw down with the likes of Harley Davidson, Indian, Triumph, and anyone else in the cruiser game. Though to hear Ducati tell it, they're not taking aim at any one company in particular so much as they're trying to offer an option for somebody who's interested in something that doesn't fit the traditional cruiser mold. That's pretty fitting, seeing as at the time the X was Ducati's fastest 0 to 60 bike, proving that yes, a muscle cruiser can absolutely trounce your leader bike off the line. As a quick aside to the sport bike rider out there who's currently writing a comment about how his bike is faster than a cruiser, have you ever tried launching a leader bike? It is insanely difficult. It's even worse on a hypernaked like my Duke. A muscle cruiser is specifically designed to put the power down more efficiently, so all those sport bike guys who keep saying, man, my sport bike's faster than your cruiser. Sure, maybe you have a top speed advantage, but in the real world, give me a muscle bike any day. So, isn't it amazing that I get paid to do this? In 2019, the bike got a bump to 1260 cc's that made, let me see here, checks notes, 159 horsepower and 95 foot-pounds of torque? Kind of feels like they went in the wrong direction there. Despite the 3 horsepower loss that all the forum dads definitely noticed, the bike got a huge tech bump with a crapload of modern rider aids. But all the while, Ducati was very loudly dominating the world in MotoGP with one of the most staggeringly fast V4s ever made. So the folks in Italy decided to drop the V4 power plant in their street bikes, and the Diavel was no different. Now, me personally, I am a huge fan of Ducati V-twins, regardless of the size. The air-cooled one in the Scrambler is velvety and it produces some great streetable torque. The Hyper Motard will have you looking at the sky on one wheel almost as fast as a Super Duke, and the 1098 was the single best sport bike I've ever ridden. So swapping away from the V-twin had to be handled very carefully. So what are some of the advantages of the V4? Well, it's got a counter-rotating crank, which means that as the crankshaft spins faster, it helps counteract the gyroscopic forces of the wheels, so that's neat. It's making a little bit more power at 168 horsepower and 93 foot-pounds of torque, also neat. It has cylinder deactivation, neat. Oh, and the dreaded Ducati valve service is now 37 1,000 miles. And it doesn't have Desmos, meaning that the cost of ownership just became a whole lot less heart-stopping. That is, after you buy it, because it's still $30,000 out the door. But seriously, getting your old Desmobile was kind of like when you drop your phone on a concrete floor and it lands face down, and then you stand there praying to every deity you can remember that your screen won't be broken when you reach down to pick it up. See, if you had a quad lock case, that wouldn't be a problem. Not only do they make the best phone cases for us on-the-go types, but they have a suite of mounts and accessories so that you can get your bike outfitted just right. My personal go-to is the Pro mount with the wireless charging head while I'm on the bike, and then the mag wallet and the desktop wireless charger when I'm working. No matter what kind of bike you're riding, they have a mount that will work for you, whether it's a traditional bar mount, their mirror mount, the clutch mount, or any of the gazillion other options they have. Click the link down in the description below to check out everything Quadlock has to offer, and a huge shout out to Quadlock for sponsoring this video. Now with that digression out of the way, let's see how the XDiavel feels in the Twisties.
Alright, so now that we're out on the road and we're getting to experience the XDiavel in some nice Twisties here in Colorado, the first thing you're going to notice, and I'm going to mention this a handful of times throughout this video, is there is a heavy emphasis on cruiser in this sport cruiser. Now don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that this is not a sporty motorcycle, because it is, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit. But this bike is also very heavy on the cruiser. In some senses, there are compromises made, and we're going to talk about all that. But first and foremost, let's talk about the fact that this is the most comfortable muscle bike I've ever sat on. It is, my feet are in a great spot, my ass is in a great spot, the seat is really nice, and it cups you in all the right ways. You're gonna want that nice butt shelf and that cradling effect. The next thing I can say about this is that it is the most refined muscle bike I've ever ridden. It is surprising how smooth it is, how linear the power delivery is. There's no peaks, there's no valleys. Everything just feels really, really refined. A lot of muscle bikes they feel chaotic and angry, and that's part of the fun, but you don't want the chaos and anger to get in between you and the Twisties, because a lot of times muscle bikes will suffer in a corner. The XDiavel absolutely does not. Despite having a wheelbase of about 1 beluga whale, it is amazing how quick this thing is side to side. Now, because we're at a press launch here, we did go through a big content brief this morning, and they explained a lot about the motorcycle. And one of the things they mentioned was a counter-rotating crankshaft, which means that the crank is spinning in the opposite direction of the wheels. And they said that that helps counteract some of the gyroscopic forces and make a bike that is a little on the heavier side for a motorcycle, but certainly a sport bike, dip over a lot faster. I highly expected that to be a marketing gimmick. I really did not expect it to work. But having ridden the Diavel Carbon, the Gen 2 1260, I can tell you that this XDiavel is the best handling Diavel I've ever ridden. This is the only muscle cruiser where I feel willing to say that, you know, even at 90 miles an hour, it'll just cut side to side, no problem. It is shocking how good this bike is going into a corner, coming out of a corner, shifting through switchbacks. It is really, really, really good. Another thing that really helps, and this is something I found with all of the 240 section muscle cruisers that have the big rear tire. Any muscle cruiser with this big of a rear tire transitions so smoothly. Now, of course, a muscle cruiser that's putting down 168 horsepower needs to be paired with some good brakes and solid suspension, and of course this is. Radial master cylinder, big honkin' stonkin' Brembos, and I'm not gonna hop on it because I got Blockhead right behind me. But I have done myself a very brief panic stop, and this bike stops. We talked about how comfy the seat is and how it really caresses your bottom. You are locked in with two great hands grabbing each cheek and just holding you exactly where you need to be. Problem with that is your cheeks are exactly where they need to be and you can't move them. So you've seen me diving into a corner all crossed up like this, right? Trying to dip down into a corner. I'm leaning all off the top of my, all above my hips. And it's hard, actually. It's hard work because you're moving your entire top end from this side to this side to this side, and it's actually a lot of work. Now you are dealing with a very big rear tire with a giant contact patch. So do you need to lean off this motorcycle? No. You're gonna notice that the guys in front of me are not all crossed up like they're trying to be Valentino Rossi on the street, or Marc Marquez, or whoever your favorite GP guy is. I just do that because it feels natural to me. On this bike, it feels very unnatural, so you kind of have to rewire your brain a little bit to just accept that the bike is gonna lean, and you gotta do it Adventure Dad style, where you're just sitting kind of ramrod still and then letting the whole thing just rotate underneath you. Riding like that is more than a little odd on this bike because you can feel the racing heritage in this thing. It really sucks to say that because it sounds like a corporate line, but you really can tell that this bike is derived from some of the most sophisticated go-fast motorcycles on the planet. So much of the technology in here is from the Panigale, it's from the Multistrada, it's from the other Diavel. There's a lot of technology in here that is trickled down from MotoGP into a cruiser, which is wild. But, and there is a but, sure, you have a really nice racing pedigree behind you, you got all this MotoGP style technology on the bike. It doesn't lug very well. If you're the kind of muscle cruiser guy who likes a big broad spread of power down low, this bike is not for you. It responds so well to being flogged, and it responds poorly to being baby. But I could see somebody who's like, but I want to cruise and I want to have a nice big meaty pile of torque to, you know, power out of a corner at 3,000 RPM. Yeah, this bike is like, the f you doing, dude? Downshift twice and then try again. The quick shifter doesn't work super great down low. It's just the bike isn't happy down low. But then the minute you start revving it out, you get it to like 5.5, 6,000 RPM, it starts to wake up. You get it to 7,000 RPM, it's like, okay, we're having some fun. You get it to 9,000 RPM, and it's like, let's f***ing go. But again, I could totally see how that might turn somebody off. It is fine to be mellow with it, sure, but you can kind of tell that this bike doesn't want to be ridden mellow styles. Which gives me a good lead-in to talking about some of the other cons that I've noticed with this motorcycle, because as much fun as it is, and as awesome as it is, there are some issues that I have with this thing that we got to talk about.
Now, normally when I do a shot like this, it's outside, but I got stuck in the rain. So yeah, I decided to come inside where we have nice lighting, so you can look at the pretty red bike. Now, you heard me mention this in the ride section, but one of the things that was kind of annoying me about the bike is how down low, it feels like it's running super lean. It stumbles and it stalls really easily. In fact, I stalled this bike 5 or 6 times today. It feels like it needs a lot more gas to get going from a stop, and below 4,000 RPM, it feels so lean that it's ready to just give up. I'm 100% positive that that is gonna go away with a tune. That really does feel like emissions holding the bike back. What you gonna do? A lot of bikes suck right out of the gate, especially down low nowadays, just because we have to make emissions. Now I know some people out there are gonna say, well, just disable the cylinder deactivation. Unfortunately, you can't. But one thing I do wanna say on a positive note is the cylinder deactivation is so smooth that I didn't notice it. This is another thing that I mentioned a little bit in the vlogs, but the seat on this bike, for me, it would need to change. Specifically, I'd be looking at the touring seat, which is a little bit taller and has more of a curve to it, so that I can move around. I would also set my XDiavel up with the mids, which you see on this bike right here. The combination of those two things would completely change the attitude of the motorcycle, and it would be a lot more aggressive to ride. That's just how I prefer to ride it. Frankly, I would actually get the XDiavel because it has the option to have forwards on it. You can set it up however you want to with this motorcycle, which is really cool. Along the lines of things that I'd like to see change with this bike, Ducati did not need to reinvent the handlebar with this. Specifically, the handlebar is 3 pieces. It's one central chunk that actually connects to the triple tree, and then it's 2 bars that get socked in there that I suppose could rotate a little bit. I don't know why they decided to do this. It's an overly complicated solution for something that we already had solved. The reason why this bothers me is it means that you can't adjust the handlebars. Sure, you can rotate them a little bit, you might be able to widen them a tad, but I like to move my handlebars physically side to side because it makes me more comfortable. It's one of those little adjustments that not a lot of people do, but I do on every single one of my motorcycles that has a handlebar, and I would want to do it on this one. Specifically, I am still battling a shoulder injury, and towards the end of the day, this shoulder was getting very tight because it was just outstretched the whole time. I can't really lift my arm up. That's about as good as I got right now. Another thing that I'd really love to see on a motorcycle that does cost $30,000 from the factory, I'd like to see heated grips on this bike, especially since we were caught in some really cold rain. I would have loved to have the heated grips, but I mean, it's 30 grand. That's just me. Normally I'd mount up to show you the ergonomics here, but because this bike is so modular, you can set it up to fit exactly the way you want. There's 3 different forward positions, there's mid positions. I fit on this bike very well. 650 Ebe, who's taller than me in all legs, he was fitting on it well. Blockhead was fitting on it well. Dustin from Revzilla was fitting on it great. This bike fits a wide variety of riders. The only other bike I can think of that is this modular in terms of its rider ergonomic setup is actually Kawasaki's Vulcan 650, which is super, super modular. You can set that bike up for just about any rider. This is almost as good. If the handlebar was more adjustable, it'd be better. Now, with all that said, let's get this bike out on the highway and see how that translates out on the open road.
So all that adds up to a pretty damn comfortable motorcycle, I'm not gonna lie. This bike definitely is more cruiser than muscle bike. Don't get me wrong, there's tons of muscle here to cruise with, but you can feel that it's a cruiser. This truly is a cruiser bike. And, you know, I think that there's definitely some room there because the Diavel itself, the base Diavel, is truly fat monster. But this definitely is a cruiser. The wind is, I'm getting more disturbance actually because I have this rig in front of me than I would otherwise. I can feel that the wind would be just really laminar going over my head, which makes this a very nice place to sit. Plus they do have windscreen options if you want that. You can get, I've seen guys with Diavels that have windscreens that wouldn't look out of place on a Heritage. Now, one of the things I wasn't going to be super sure about was the forwards on this because I'm coming to the Diavel from a more sporting background. So riding the X with the forwards, I wasn't entirely sure I was going to love it. It really does make this thing purely a comfort bike. But I'll mention it again, the power's not going to smack you in the face, right? When you're sitting on the Rocket 3, that power, I measured it in Unga Bungas. This one actually feels more like it went to college. you know? The power here is sophisticated, and it comes on in a linear fashion. It's not just, me go fast, grrr! No, it's, okay, it's time to accelerate, and I'm going to do it linear, predictable, and put down the power in the most efficient way I can possibly do it, because I am related to race bikes. In a world where the Rocket 3 is putting down 180, I'd like to see this at 180 or 185 or 190. Be the true successor to the Vmax. You know what I mean? That would be really, really cool. You've got cruise control, programmable modes, everything. And the nice thing is, yeah, you can go in and dial it, but you also don't have to. Because I think one of the things about cruisers that's nice is you want it to be pure. The nice thing, though, is cruise control. Super easy. It's one button on, one button program, and then roll to kill. Again, it's just, this is a more sophisticated motorcycle, and you can feel it. But that leads me into a more broad question that I have about muscle bikes generally. Now, I've been running this thing through its paces all day long, and I've developed a lot of thoughts and opinions about the XDiavel, but I know the question that people are going to ask me immediately, like right at the top, is because these things are priced at 30 G's, and the Rocket 3 is 25, people are going to wonder, Rocket 3 or XDiavel? That's a hard question to answer, and I'm not just being mealy-mouthed for the sake of copping out. It's actually a difficult question because, honestly, these bikes are very, very different. The XDiavel is refined, it's smooth, it's a sport bike, and it was designed by a sport bike company. Versus the Rocket 3, which is a lot more like a sledgehammer. The Rocket 3 handles pretty darn well, I'm not gonna lie. But it's not nearly as sharp as this thing is. First thing going against the Rocket 3 is its big-ass front tire. This has a normal sport bike front end. This also has the counter-rotating crank. The Rocket 3 is a shitload heavier than this is. I think it's like 200 pounds heavier than this is. So this thing's way more effective at putting down its power. But the other side of that coin is the Rocket 3's Unga Bunga torque factor. When you whack the throttle open on the Rocket 3, it punches you in your taint. That's the best way I can say it. That seat back, that like the butt shelf just hits you right in the tailbone every time. And because it's a shaft drive and, you know, longitudinal crank and all that stuff, you bounce down the road. You get like maybe an inch of shaft jack every time you hop on the throttle. And it's not just the suspension decompressing, it's the physical mass of spinning parts lifting you off the ground. Which makes it definitely a lot more Unga Bunga fun, because it is the least sophisticated motorcycle I've ever seen. Despite, you know, all of its technology and stuff, it has an IQ of maybe 60. Because the Rocket 3 is a simpleton, shall we say, it fits the muscle cruiser vibe a little harder than just about any other bike, including the XDiavel. So if you want the muscle cruiser, it is still the Rocket 3. Would I put this in the number 2 slot? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I think I'm too much of a V-twin purist, and the sound that the 1200 Diavel makes, the Gen 1, when you've got the Works exhaust, there's nothing quite like it. So it's hard for me to say that this is a better motorcycle for me. This is, without a doubt, a better motorcycle. But for me, is it the better bike? Probably, because it's got cruise control, and if I want to put forwards on it, I can. If I want to put mids on it, I can. The valve services are so far apart. It's 37,000 miles before the valves are due. Is it better than the Vmax? If this thing was making 180 horsepower, this would be a Vmax destroyer for sure. And then when you start looking at some of the other muscle cruisers like the Nightster, the Sportster S, the Indian Scout, some of the smaller ones, this just isn't playing in the same pool. That's the kiddie pool. This is for big boys. This bike is not perfect, but it has just so much pizzazz and it is so thrilling to ride because the harder you ride it, the more fun you're having. I'd need a new seat, and I'd want the mids, but other than that, goddamn, this is a double thumbs up for me. This is a seriously good bike. So there you have it, guys. That is my review on the 2025 Ducati XDiavel. A huge shout out to Ducati for bringing me out here. Super excited to see what else they have coming down the way. They've got some really sweet bikes in the lineup right now, and I still got to get my hands on a 698 mono. Who knows? Maybe that'll be the next giveaway bike. Catch you guys in the next one. See you later.